you're tuning into something different, something deeper. Welcome to a space where the unseen becomes seen, where the patterns beneath reality are decoded. This isn't just a podcast, it's a journey into the mechanics of belief, perception, and the multidimensional truths shaping our world. If you've ever felt like an outsider looking in, questioning the systems you're told to follow, you're in the right place. This is the Outcast, the Pattern Podcast. Let's dive in.
Okay, let's unpack this. Symbols. When you hear that word, you might think of, traffic signs, company logos, maybe an emoji.
Sure, the everyday stuff.
Right. But what if symbols are far, far more ancient? Tapping into something really primal, maybe older than language itself, older even than cities.
That's exactly the idea that jumps out right away in the source material we're diving into today.
Yeah, this text, it's got this really intriguing title, Old Signs and Modern Symbols and Its Occult Meanings.
It really takes you on a journey, doesn't it? It looks at the whole life cycle of symbols, from their sacred origins, then how their power was, let's say, corrupted or misused.
Corrupted, yeah.
Then their resilience, how they seem to endure, and finally how they pop up today. Even in pop culture, like you mentioned.
It feels like understanding the deep history, the kind of DNA of how we make meaning.
Exactly. It's not just definitions. It's about seeing symbols as these fundamental tools for connection, sometimes for control.
Right.
And how they're still shaping our world. So our mission here, based totally on this one source, is to pull out the most important insights.
Why symbols are so foundational, how powerful they can be for transformation, but also how that power can be twisted.
And how they still guide meaning today, connecting really ancient ideas to, something you might stream tonight.
Okay, so what really grabbed me right at the start was this idea that symbols are older than language, older than organized society. What does the source say that suggests about, early human consciousness?
It's a huge shift in perspective, isn't it? The source puts us right back at that dawn of human consciousness. It calls it the mythic threshold. And this is the moment where perception went beyond what was merely seen.
Beyond just the physical thing.
Yeah. So the wind wasn't just air moving leaves. Suddenly it's an omen. Bleeding isn't just an injury. It becomes sacrifice. It's described as the very first step humanity took from matter to meaning.
Wow. So those first symbolic actions, they weren't about drawing a picture of something, but making something mean something deeper.
Precisely.
Like a handprint on a cave wall, or maybe a simple spiral, or just placing a stone in a certain way.
Exactly. These weren't just random marks. The source stresses they were intended. It uses this beautiful phrase, the mind reaching through matter, wrapping presence around absence.
Wrapping presence around absence.
So a symbol, in that original sense, isn't just a stand-in for something else. It's a summoning. It actually brings a deeper reality into form.
And philosophically, the source connects this to a shift, right?
Yeah.
From the ontic, just what is, to the ontological, what is meant.
Yes, it does. It touches on ideas about how reality sort of reveals itself, even referencing things like the Hermetic principle, as above, so below. The symbol is framed as the key showing the world isn't just random stuff. It's encoded, resonant with pattern.
Encoded, resonant, I like that. It calls them bridges, oracles, keys, tools for connection.
And maybe the most powerful description is the grammar of the soul's dialogue with the cosmos.
That really shifts things, doesn't it? From symbols as just passive pictures to, an active language for talking with something bigger than us.
And you see that active power most clearly in myth and ritual. The source is clear. Here, symbols aren't just metaphors you think about. They're living intermediaries.
Living intermediaries.
Yeah, things you interact with. It uses the Egyptian ike as a prime example. It wasn't just a drawing representing life. It was seen as a literal conduit of life force, something the gods actually used to grant vitality.
Whoa, okay. That's a completely different way of seeing it. Not symbolic representation, but symbolic action.
Exactly. So in a ritual, drawing or speaking, a symbol isn't just decorative. It summons presence through form.
And ritual itself. The source calls it architecture for the soul to commune with the eternal.
Right. And the labyrinth is a great example it gives. Walking a labyrinth isn't just a symbol of a journey.
It is the journey.
It is the journey, enacted physically. And this gets to a core esoteric idea. The symbol becomes what it signifies through intention and repetition. You engage with it, you embody it.
That makes sense of the power behind things like, say, the Eleusinian mysteries, or working with Norse runes, as the source mentions.
Their sacred function was about aligning the soul with that larger cosmic order. The logos, or knots. The symbol opens a gate.
But then the source gives this really crucial warning. All gates swing both ways.
That power, that ability to open channels, it can be, well, corrupted. Badly.
And the first corruption, how does that happen?
It happens when the symbol is basically ripped out of its context, divorced from its initiatory depth. So instead of inviting personal transformation, it gets twisted into a mask used to impose obedience.
Right. And this is where the source talks about the sorcery of empire, religion as institution, and propaganda, using sacred power for control.
You see it historically. The source brings up the Sumerian me, these divine laws on symbolic tablets, meant as a cosmic blueprint, right? But rulers seized them, twisted them into codex and chain, tools for control. How even tiny details can hide, well, layers of historical mystery. We're digging into the scholarly debate around the heritage of the Indo-Christian name reference to Yahweh.
And what's really fascinating here, looking at the sources, articles, papers, all that, is how they all zero in on this one specific point of argument.
Right.
It's about tracing where a name reference comes from. Sounds simple, maybe?
Yeah, it seems like it should be.
But scholars have been wrestling with this for years. And, they often end up with totally contradictory answers.
Using the same evidence, too, which is wild.
Exactly. Same historical clues, same linguistic data.
Why is this one point so contested?
Okay, so right away, the sources kind of lay out two main perspectives, two main camps in this whole discussion.
What's one side arguing, based on the sources?
Well, according to one group, the heritage of this specific Indo-Christian name reference points back towards connections with the thunder god Baal.
Baal, okay. And how do the sources say they make that connection?
It often comes down to linguistic analysis. Very detailed stuff.
Like the specific words.
Exactly. They might point to, say, possible etymological links, word origins, or maybe shared descriptions, or, titles used for both figures in ancient texts they've looked at. The idea is that the exact words, the sort of linguistic components tied to that name reference, they show a line back to Baal's cultural sphere, especially around ideas of divine power, maybe. That's how these sources interpret it.
Okay, interesting. But then it gets complicated because our sources show a completely different take as well.
Oh, yeah. There's another major group of scholars, and they argue pretty strongly against that specific link to Baal.
So what's their argument, according to the sources? How do they read the evidence?
Well, they often push back on those linguistic points or the context. They might offer, say, different root words, different etymologies for the name reference.
Linking it somewhere else.
Right. Maybe to broader religious ideas or divine titles that were, common across a wider area or time period, stuff they find in other texts or even archaeological finds.
So for them, the exact words tell a different story.
Pretty much. Their analysis suggests the heritage is tied into a more, let's say, general tradition of naming gods or talking about the divine, something separate from the specific traits of Baal as they read the sources.
Okay.
Or the example of the divine name, YHVH, in Kabbalah, meant as this vibratory key for unity.
And it becomes a tool of exclusion, of hierarchy, when it's hoarded, hidden, or weaponized.
It's a fundamental shift, isn't it? The source calls it a metaphysical shift. From epiphany to ideology, from symbol as path to symbol as prison.
And some of the examples are just heartbreaking. The cross, originally resurrection, love marched into war.
Yeah.
The eye of Horus, healing. Restoration now often just means surveillance.
And the sigil that started as this really personal, powerful contract between the soul and the cosmos for manifestation.
Right, for intention.
And now, the source says it's often drained of spirit, plastered on corporate logos, still having a hypnotic power, but used for influence, not inner work.
It paints a pretty grim picture, that corruption aspect. But then the source offers this incredibly important counterpoint.
Which is?
That core truth.
Yeah.
Symbols cannot be killed, only misused.
Okay. That's a critical distinction.
Definitely. And the swastika example really drives this home. The source reminds us, long before fascism hijacked it.
It was used everywhere.
Exactly. A solar spiral. Life, good fortune, Hindu, Buddhist, indigenous American traditions. The source argues the symbol itself was never evil. It was enslaved, its power inverted by intention.
So it's not the shape itself, but the intention behind it, the energy put into it.
That's the core idea. The metaphysical core is that symbols act like mirrors of the will. They respond to intention and resonance. It's like correspondence and charge in magic. Energy flows where consciousness directs it.
Which means reclaiming a symbol, or even just using it positively, isn't about erasing its history.
Yeah.
It's about actively reconsecrating it.
Reconsecrating, infusing it with deliberate, positive intention and energy. That's the idea presented.
So like the pentagram example, drawing it isn't just doodling.
Now, the source suggests it's a conscious act of choosing alignment either with the elemental balance or with its perversion. Intention is everything.
And that focus on intention and action leads us straight into how symbols are used in practice, right? In ritual, but also psychologically.
Yeah, the source describes true ritual as this intricate choreography of symbols. You know, the circle, the altar, the elements, maybe a sigil. They aren't just props. They're glyphs of power, mirroring the architecture of cosmos and psyche. The outer reflects the inner.
It gives the example of the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, the LBRP.
Right. Tracing pentagrams, invoking archangels. The source interprets this as mapping your body onto the cosmos. Microcosm, macrocosm.
Aligning yourself with the universe.
Exactly. It recalibrates not only the room, but the self. It's framed as psychic purification through symbolic resonance, using symbols to literally tune yourself.
And things like planetary hours, moon phases, colors and chaos magic, that's also about alignment.
That's the suggestion. Aligning your personal intention with the archetypal flow. Symbols and timings act like tuning forks, helping your will resonate with larger patterns.
Okay, so that's the ritual side. But what about the psychological impact? The source says symbols don't just decorate, they forge consciousness.
Yes, and this connects strongly with Jung's ideas, which the source clearly draws on. The psyche is seen as this inner theater of archetypes and symbols. They're the bridges between our everyday conscious ego and that deeper unconscious self.
So working with a symbol is like talking to your own depths.
Pretty much. A conversation with the deep mind. The serpent example is perfect here.
Right, I mean so many different things. Wisdom, temptation, rebirth, danger.
All at once. And the source argues that encountering the serpent in myth, dreams, ritual, isn't just intellectual. It's confronting a primordial energy within, a force that slithers through fear and transformation alike. The psyche has this visceral recognition. You feel it.
And dream work fits in here too, like a ritual.
Exactly. Those recurring symbols in dreams, a door, fire, a specific animal, they're like psychic sigils, charged with your own emotions, waiting to be understood.
So engaging with them consciously, trying to decode them, that's inner theurgy. Working on your own soul with symbols.
Awakening parts of the soul long buried. That's the idea. Using symbols for self-transformation.
This whole concept of symbols as active tools really highlights that resurgence the source talks about in modern occultism, witchcraft, chaos magic, esoteric art.
Yes, it frames it not as fantasy play, but as metaphysical literacy and rebirth. People are relearning this ancient symbolic language.
Sigilcraft is a key example, right? Taking a desire, making it a symbol, charging it.
Influenced by spare, now adapted digitally.
Yeah.
Abstracting desire, meditating, charging, then forgetting it consciously. The Force calls it modern logos manipulation. The word becomes flesh through symbol and psyche.
Intentional creation.
And tarot. Its huge popularity isn't just fortune-telling.
Not in this view. It's seen as a symbolic mirror of the psyche. Each card, a portal.
Like the tower meaning ruin, but also catharsis, recalibration. Or the high priestess representing the unconscious feminine. Exactly. They're archetypal doorways. And you even see this symbolic language exploding. Online memes, aesthetic sigils, tattoos.
The source mentions the danger and the promise there. Superficiality versus a potential deep semiotic awakening.
Right. Are people just playing with images, or are they starting to instinctively grasp their power? The conclusion is that modern practitioners are blending old and new, rediscovering that to master a symbol is to master oneself. The craft becomes ritual self-creation.
Which leads us, fascinatingly, to mainstream media. The source suggests the veil is thinner than we think.
And this is where WandaVision comes in, the Marvel show from 2021. The source calls it a striking example of a modern ritual wrapped in mainstream narrative.
Okay, explain that. Wanda creates the hex, shaping reality out of grief and desire.
Which looks like chaos, right?
Yeah.
But the source analyzes it symbolically. It's seen as a ritual of shadow embodiment, bringing her deepest pain and wishes into reality.
She creates a sacred space, that pocket dimension bounded by her will, reconstructs her life inside it.
The source argues it's a perfectly structured working of chaos magic. There's intention, symbol, the sitcoms, sacrifice, trapping people, and consequences.
Until the confrontation with Agatha, where she realizes magic without awareness is not creation, but enslavement.
That's the turning point. And symbolically, according to the source, it's when Wanda accepts her shadow, embraces her power, and dons the symbolic mantle of the Scarlet Witch.
Complete with that runic crown.
Yes. And then she consciously puts wards, protective symbols, around the hex. The source calls that a classic ritual of magical protection and mastery.
And it points out specific symbols, the hex as a magic circle, the runes giving dominion, the crown signifying integration like alchemy's Canutio.
Yeah, the analysis connects it all back to these esoteric principles.
So the narrative shows unconscious trauma becoming this conscious ritual of sovereignty, taking control through symbolic action.
So what is WandaVision then, viewed through this lens? The source literally asks, is it a public dream, a communal vision, carrying ritual structure disguised as entertainment?
Wow. It compares it to ancient Greek theater, Dionysian rites, where audiences absorbed symbolic initiations through performance.
And suggests that today we gather before screens and the symbols still work, even when veiled in pixels. The collective unconscious response.
Maybe it's not always accidental. Writers tapping into that archetypal deep.
That's the implication.
Yeah.
And for modern practitioners, people learning this symbolic language.
They can decode these narratives as contemporary grimoires. Watching Wanda becomes a mirror, a symbolic call in their own lives.
Exactly. It transforms passive viewing into something potentially active.
So this brings us to the final point from the source. Modern media isn't the death of myth, but maybe its reincarnation.
WandaVision showing personal grief transforming into a kind of cosmic ritual on screen. The ancient symbols are still there, beneath the gloss.
And this is the true revival of the occult, according to the source, not just in books, but in the everyday mythos of culture.
Those who are looking, who learn to read these signs, can find them everywhere. And by understanding them, it all circles back to that core truth. Symbols aren't just decorations of life. They are its code.
Learning their language is touching the grammar of reality, the soul's alphabet.
This revival is spiritual, psychological, cosmic. A kind of whisper, the source suggests, urging us to remember we're initiates in an ever-speaking one, not just isolated parts of a machine.
Phew. Okay, so this deep dive, drawing entirely from that single really dense source, has taken us from humanity's first meaningful marks all the way to analyzing streaming TV shows.
Yeah, it really hammers home how fundamental symbols are to, well, everything about how we make meaning.
Absolutely. And it leaves us with a pretty big thought, doesn't it? If symbols are this fundamental grammar of reality showing up everywhere, sometimes unconsciously, how might you listening now start looking for and interpreting the symbols in your own life?
Yeah, what patterns might you notice in your dreams, maybe daily interactions, the media you consume? What hidden meanings could be waiting right there just for you to see them?